It's really wonderful to see so many of you here this evening. Thank you for coming. I know we've had people come as far afield as Scotland and Wales, and also from Ukraine. And we've got a real mix of loyal Innovista supporters as well as lots of new friends. So it's great to see you, and you're really, really welcome. If I haven't spoken to you this evening, I'm Mary. I'm one of the Innovista team. Innovista's purpose is to identify, equip, and develop leaders to transform their communities with the hope of Jesus. And having worked in Ukraine since 2003, we were really perfectly positioned a year ago when the war started to pivot and to respond to the desperate needs of those leaders and their communities. Many of you gave really generously as part of that response, and I hope this evening will be a really good opportunity to reflect on the difference that we've been able to make together. So this evening we've got two short presentations. Firstly, we'll hear from our National Director in Ukraine, Anatoliy Sapsay, who will share some of the stories of the leaders that we've equipped. And then secondly, we'll hear from Jason Lane, Innovista's International Director, who's going to share what our work looks like in the next phase. So please, will you just give a warm welcome to Anatoliy?
Everyone, good evening, and it's a great privilege to be here tonight. So thank you for coming. I would like to share a few stories with you for you to be aware of what was happening during this year. You know, me personally, this is a day, exactly a year ago, and me personally, I was so convinced it's not going to happen. I was wrong. And first, what all of us in Ukraine, we felt it's a great sense of shock when we have to learn all new sounds connected with the sirens and shelling. And as one leader described very well, this deep sense of shock, he said that he was so depressed that he went out of his home and literally vomited. The very next day, he and his team decided to open, he comes to his sense, and everyone in Ukraine has to do that. So on the very next day, they opened their church to become a shelter to host the people who were running from the war. And these pictures you see, they were made on second and third day of the war. And Innovista was the first agent who was able to equip them in order for them to do this wonderful job of rescuing people. Or you can hear the testimony of another leader, the pastor we were training.
So when the war started, I personally felt very confused, well, to some degree scared and shocked, because I did not see that coming. I was an optimist. But also as a leader, as a church leader, I didn't know what to do, because everything we thought and everything we planned to do was irrelevant. Now it was a matter of just helping people survive. So probably for a week, we all were in a state of shock, and we gathered together with people who stayed in Lviv, and we just discussed, okay, we prayed, we thought, okay, what can we do? We see so many people on the streets that are refugees, that are running away from the war, because our city Lviv is in the west part of Ukraine, so a lot of people from east would be coming to Lviv, and they just didn't have where to sleep. So first decision we did, we actually canceled Sunday service, and we said, okay, let's just use our church facility, and let's make it like a shelter for those people.
And this is what they did. They turned this is actually the place where the church gathered. They removed all chairs, put mattresses, and arranged this shelter, which was running through the time of evacuation. And because you equipped us to help them, they were able to host 4,000 people in their shelter. But up to this moment, we realized that our main emphasis was located in Western Ukraine because of our connection and network. But we understood that we need to change our approach, how we help, because as close we move to the front line of fire, as more people are there, many of these families decided not to leave the country, but just relocated on little safer places, in the conviction that in 2 months, war will be over. So, as closer you come to the firing zone, as greater need was there, as more people were concentrated. So we decided to spread our support and help throughout the country. All those dots represent churches Innovista was equipping and supporting in order for them to be able to arrange wonderful work of evacuation, feeding, and helping people. And here are a few stories. On the left, you see a lady. Her name is Ira. She's a mother of 5 children. When war started, she said, I asked myself a question, what can I do? She, as a family, they owned a car, 9-seat minivan. So they said, with her husband, I can evacuate people. They live in a Poltava, which is 2.5 hours drive from Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine, 2.5 million inhabitants, 2.5 million, which at that time was already half encircled, heavily shelled and bombed, with many people willing to evacuate, but not being able to because of lack of transportation. So, on a normal time, before the war, the journey would take 2.5 hours. But because of main roads were under attack, so they were using sneaky roads nobody knew before about. And it would take 5 hours to travel from Kharkiv to Poltava. They were using such bridges and roads in such a condition. So no surprise that it would take so long. Very often she was using roads she had no idea where they lead to. So you see, she was taping her smartphone with a GPS signal in order to know where to go. People usually system worked in such a way that people were waiting in this very basement in Kharkiv, sometimes 2-3 days in order to be evacuated. But very often people with children or disabled or sick people were not able to wait so long, but nobody was willing to evacuate them. So Ira was the person who was doing that. For example, one interesting story. She was evacuating this older man who was sick with COVID, and he was in need of using oxygen pillow, you see on the picture. And interesting, the pillow lasts for 2, maximum 3 hours. But their journey was 5 hours, but oxygen was enough. Until she delivered him to the point where he got special equipment with the oxygen help. Her personal record is 27 people fitting 9-seat minivan. It's her personal record. At some stage, her husband joined her. he took the bus, the same minivan from church, and they both were evacuating, shuffling between two cities and evacuating people. Altogether, Ira and her husband evacuated over 1,000 people. And Innovista, with your help, were able to support them with helping with tires and diesel, which turned to be saved lives. Another story, lady in a blue hat. Her name is Halina. She is located in Kryvyi Rih, which is south of Ukraine. The tragedy of her story is that she said the most difficult thing during the war was not so much bombing from Russians, as in her particular church, senior leaders left the church running away, leaving church behind. And when she found this situation, she said, I realized that I need to stay and help and support people around. So they discovered that lower, closer to Kherson, there are many villages where people desperately need help. Because at that point, they realized that so much destruction and people didn't have bread. So they, as a church, start to bake bread and to bring to those villages. This is a real picture of village in Kherson area. Where they arrived and were helping people with the bread, they discovered a lot of children there whose parents were not or could not or would not evacuate. And they realized they need to help those kids. And this is what they started to do. Just coming on a regular basis, spending time with children, having some Bible reading, just having fun, games, etc., just to create some sense of hope and childhood into the lives of those children who were in such a horror. They helped a lot with clothing, with blankets, so together she and her team helped over 430 children in those villages. This was the most pleasant moment, she said, when we were arriving to the villages. Kids were extremely happy because their lives was happening from the visit to visit. Meanwhile, sitting in the basements, just hiding from the shelling. Or another story, it's a Slavic, one pastor from the Kharkiv, whom we supported. And he said that when he realized the war broke, he was in the need to evacuate his family because Kharkiv was heavily shelled. So he said, the hardest moment was for me separation because I had no idea where my family is going. And I had no idea what is going to happen to me. But when he sent his family out, he said, I had a strong conviction, I need to stay. He asked himself, he was sharing with us, am I a soldier? Should I stand and fight? No, I am a pastor and social worker. And I will do what I can do best to take care of people, help those around me who are in great need. And this is what they started. They started with full delivery, helping people around in desperate need. Through he and his team, through their center, delivered and distributed over 1,400 tons of food in around Kharkiv. But at some point, challenges changed. The challenges have changed because Russians changed their approach, how they do their war. They started to bomb civilian infrastructure. They started to bomb power plants, and Ukraine faced blackout. I don't know if you have ever been in a situation that you have no light in your home. No light in your home. And the only light you have for sure is this. You see a real picture when you can wash your dishes, and this is the only light you have. But not only that, when you don't have light, you have to be aware very often, and exactly, you don't have, your fridge is not functioning. You don't have hot water. Your heating system is not in operation. and it can last for several days, taking into account that winter is approaching and outside temperature drops. How it would be, what life it will be. So, for many churches, for many leaders, generator become a great deal to find and being able to bring. And this is what Innovista start to do, helping leaders in churches to equip their churches with generator. So far we equipped 26 churches with generators. And this is people of Kherson being extremely thankful for this opportunity to have generator and being able to arrange, for example, such places like this. It's a social center where people could come, charge their phones, get some hot drink, and spend some time in light, because whole day they're sitting in dark basement without anything. And all of this possible because behind the wall, generator is functioning and supplying electricity to these people. Or this very team of Slavic was arranging several clubs for children. Again, all of this possible because a generator is working outside. Or bring some, as I said, some sense in the middle of the war, some sense of joy and entertainment to children, because this is a theater happening in the middle of the war for children. All of this possible because of generators or this youth work. Another challenge that we discovered is the fact that a lot of people facing post-war syndrome in Ukraine. A lot of people have witnessed bombing, and it's ruined their souls. So, with the help of Viva ministry in UK, Innovista translated, printed, and start to distribute a resource so-called Resilient Family. With the help of another ministry called Realis, we were able to arrange big online training for 95 mentors in order for them to get in their hand this training to be able to help people around Ukraine and even beyond Ukraine. And here two wonderful stories. Here you see encircled mentor called Victoria, and on the right, this is a real picture of a lady called Yulia. She's a widow of 2 children, 8 years and 4. Then this lady, experiencing the war, she get depressed, and she, up to the point she totally lost taking care of herself and totally abandoned her children, especially older one, who was totally losing the process of studying at school because of mom going through stress. So Victoria helped Yulia, bringing her through the process of restoration and going through this resilient program several weeks, and mom get back to normal, starting care of herself, and what very important, starting pay attention to her daughter was in school at that moment. Or another story, again, this mentor encircled, her name is also Victoria. It doesn't mean that all mentors Victorias in Ukraine, but in this particular case, wonderful story. This lady, Victoria, was approached with a family who was totally in despair. They have 3 children, and youngest one, called Yeva, 6-year-old girl, was in such a depression that girl refused to eat. Such a deep sense of horror. This particular family went through the shelling. They experienced shelling. Baby was girl was in such a trauma that she refused to eat. And parents didn't know what to do. So Victoria helped this family, going with them through the program, working with parents and with this girl. And praise the Lord that the girl was again back in conditions that she was able to eat and function normally. So altogether, you enable us to equip 61 churches across Ukraine and Moldova. And finishing, I want to say, On behalf of my people and on behalf of my country, I want to say great thank you. We appreciate immensely what you've done to us. Thank you so much.
Let me add my welcome to you and my deep gratitude to you for your really generous support. I hope that has given you just a taste of what your generosity has enabled to happen through the leaders and churches we are privileged to serve in Ukraine. People often say that crisis is a great revealer. One of the questions that I have been asked most often in the last 6 months is this: how is it possible that Innovista, a small organization, was able to respond so fast to what happened in Ukraine and get so much done? And the simple answer is 20. We've been working in Ukraine for 20 years. We've been working with leaders for 20 years. We've been growing a network of those leaders for 20 years. So when this phase of the war started, the network of leaders was already in place. We'd already talked to them to understand what was likely to be needed first, and we were able to respond quickly. And as Tolik described, as we've listened to these leaders, we've heard them describe the need for the way we support them to shift, and so we've been able to shift all the time, listening to local leaders, getting their input to help us shape our response. And as we now move into another shift, those conversations are continuing. This network of leaders on the ground, which numbers hundreds across the whole of Ukraine, is guiding our response. We are privileged to work with leaders like this. This is a picture from Kharkiv in October. Tolik and I were there. There's more of this team sort of round the corner. Pastor Slavik that Tolik told you about is there. And this is a session where Tolik is introducing them to the Resilient Families program. These leaders are an example of hundreds and hundreds who have served with amazing courage. They have paid a great cost. Some have paid with their lives. All are traumatized. Before this meeting, we had breakfast with another group of leaders, and they sat with us and described what they'd been through. And it was horrendous. And yet, they kept going back to rescue people, to feed people, to show them that they were not on their own. They have demonstrated remarkable resilience, but the truth is they are now exhausted. So a significant part of our next phase of work, which starts now as winter turns into spring, is that we're going to try and work with these leaders to help them replenish a bit. We're going to give opportunities for individual leaders and especially teams to get a short break, to get out of their immediate environment, to go to a place that's beautiful, where they will be well fed, where they will get spiritual and psychological support and the chance just to regroup a little bit. Their resilience is key. And they've told us that they need the opportunity to decompress a little bit, to talk with each other, and to be supported by some professional help so that they can understand a little better of what's happened to them and prepare to go again, because they want to keep going in service of their communities. So we're going to help with that, starting in the spring. Something else that the war has revealed is a new generation of young leaders. The leaders have started popping up all over the place, like Ira, who you saw, who's with her husband, rescued 1,000 people in her van. Leaders have popped up everywhere. These are two that we met in a place called Katazhanka. This is Sergei and Alex Vitolik in Katazhanka. Katazhanka is very close to the border with Belarus. It was one of the first places occupied by Russian forces. And these two characters got out, but stayed close. Soon as the Russians left, and Tolik and I were there soon after, we saw the damage they'd done. Soon as the Russians left, these two guys came back. They turned the church behind them into a resource center for their community. And we stood in a series of rooms where they had created a pop-up doctor's surgery and pharmacy. Absolutely brilliant. These guys are typical young leaders. They have loads of energy, loads of creativity, and they also carry deep scars. So part of our next phase of work is going to be to invest even more intensely into this rising generation of young leaders. We're going to work with them through training and mentoring to develop the character and skill that is required for long-term servant leadership. We're going to help them so that their scars turn into strengths. We're going to help people like them to serve their communities, to demonstrate the hope of Jesus to those around them. Resilient leaders build resilient churches. We've seen it for the last year, and we expect to continue to see it as long as the leaders get the help that they need. Resilient churches exist for the good of their communities. They persevere despite the pressure and the pain. And these churches can bring lasting hope and change, even in the horror of war, because they follow the risen Jesus. Churches that welcome children whose families have often been torn apart, children whose childhoods have been stolen. Churches that care for adults who have lost jobs and homes and loved ones. Churches are creating communities of care and support for people who've lost everything. And these churches go looking for the most vulnerable in their communities. Can you imagine if you're alone, no family, no friends, your apartment has been bombed, and two young people come looking for you, and they show and tell you that you matter to them because you matter to God. They stand with you and demonstrate that they are with you and they are for you. That's what church should be. Winter has been a lot about survival. Pastor Slavik, who we've mentioned, wrote to us at the start of the winter and said, the number one goal of winter is just to survive. But in some places now, as winter will soon give way to spring, there is the opportunity to begin the long, difficult road towards restoration. Restoring broken lives is the work of the local church. And here's the challenge we're hearing from our network of leaders as they think about this. Here's the question they're asking. Where do we start? Where do we start? When everyone needs help, when so much is broken, where do we begin? So a big part of this next phase for Innovista in Ukraine will be to work with churches to help them answer that question, to help them figure out what ministry looks like now and in the future. Maybe it's starting something new, maybe it's adapting what they're doing already. We're going to sit down with leaders and help them figure that out. We're going to give them training, we're going to give them finance to help them start things, all to build sustainable ministry that begins to repair broken lives in the places where that's already possible. What we would love to do is to have 10 Toliks. Tolik and I were talking the other day, and we sort of split Ukraine on a map into 5 big regions. I would like to see 2 Toliks in each of those regions doing this work. Doing this work in a way that is sustained and long-term. Because that's what it's going to take. Helping grow these kind of leaders and these kind of churches that restore people and communities is difficult, long-term work. But difficult and long-term is a little less difficult when you get committed, sustained help. We've seen this through the winter. We had a telegram exchange with one of the pastors that we've met in Kyiv as the winter sort of really took hold. And he was telling us how he was struggling to heat the building, which is a tremendous resource. They have cared for thousands of people in this building. They were struggling to keep it warm. They were struggling to keep the lights on. And we said to him, would it be helpful if we just committed to pay your gas bill for the entire winter? And he wrote back and said this: you have no idea what a difference lifting that burden makes. Just one less thing to have to think about. One less worry to carry. And that's what we did. And we've done that for other churches as well. But long-term difficult work is easier when you have people standing with you for the long haul, and that's what we want to do. We will continue to work with leaders through Tolik and his team who are growing these resilient churches who will bring the hope of Christ in word and deed to their communities, who will meet the needs as they come up. But for that, resilient support is needed. We really hope this evening that you've got a glimpse into the difference your support has made so far. It has been extraordinary, and we are so thankful. And our invitation to you is very simple. If you have started supporting this effort, we'd invite you to continue. We'd invite you to continue to stand with these leaders and these churches and these communities all over Ukraine. Continue to walk with them so that they can bring hope to their communities. And if you haven't yet joined us, we'd invite you to start. Before you leave, please sign up so you can get the latest news. We'd love to keep you informed of what's going on around Ukraine. If you'd like to invest financially in growing the kind of leaders I've described, there are ways for you to do that too. If you are able, please consider giving a regular committed gift, because with that kind of commitment, we can commit to these leaders. But most of all, we just want to say thank you. Every exchange we have with leaders in Ukraine, they always say, please tell the people thank you. And if we could, we would have brought more with us, not just Tolik. We could only afford Tolik. He's very expensive. So on their behalf, thank you. Thank you for all you've given. Thank you for all the encouragement that you have been to these leaders as they serve their communities. And on their behalf, thank you very much.